The rain had been at it all night, a steady curtain over the south end of Seattle that turned streetlights into blurred halos. Inside Station 14, the emergency bays glowed under tired fluorescent tubes, the kind that made everything look a little washed out. The only real color came from the bright red of the rigs and the blue scrubs hanging on the back of folding chairs. At the rear of Medic 3, Erin Hayes stood with her head slightly bowed, hands moving without hesitation through her trauma bag. Gauze, scissors, tourniquets, airway adjuncts, syringes. Each item had a place. Each place had a reason. She did not shove supplies in. She rolled, folded, and lined them up in precise rows that never changed. 2 rolls of tape side by side, white labels facing out. IV start kits in a neat stack. Chest seals, flat air bubbles smoothed as if someone might be counting them. Her gloved fingers paused near the bottom of the bag. The nitrile caught slightly on the long scar along her forearm, hidden beneath the cuff of her dark jacket. She tugged the sleeve down and kept working. Behind her, the station hummed with ordinary noise. A sports channel mumbled from a wall-mounted TV in the day room. Someone laughed at something on their phone. The coffee machine gurgled like it might give up at any second, then decided not to. Luis Morales stepped into the bay, shrugging on his duty jacket. He was in his 40s, broad-shouldered, the kind of EMT who had seen enough to tell stories for days if anyone was still listening. He leaned on the doorframe and watched Erin adjust a row of IV catheters until they were perfectly straight. "You organizing gear or planning an invasion, Hayes Kisesen?" he said. "You know this is Seattle, not a war zone." Erin did not look up. Inventory was off, she said, found an expired saline bag. "So you reorganized the whole kit?" It was out of sequence. Luis opened his mouth, then closed it. He pushed himself off the frame and walked closer, peering into the bag. "You know the rest of us just toss stuff in and hope it is there when we need it?" Erin checked the zipper twice before pulling it closed. "I prefer to know," she said. Her voice was even low, without an edge. It left no room for teasing, but no invitation for conversation either. "Hey, Morales," a voice floated from the doorway to the day room. Jenny Park, the rookie on C-shift, had her hair in a messy bun and a half-eaten granola bar in one hand. "Captain wants you to finish your chart from the freeway call." He said the word audit and got that vein in his forehead again. Luis sighed. "That man lives to haunt my paperwork," he said, then jerked his chin toward Erin. "You coming inside, or are you going to stand out here alphabetizing oxygen tanks?" "I am done," Erin said. She slid the trauma bag into its compartment on the rig handle, facing out buckle-clipped. Habit made her press on it once to feel the weight to reassure herself it was full. Full meant ready. Inside the day room, the lights were softer, the air thicker with the smell of coffee and reheated takeout. Jackets hung on the backs of chairs, radios lined up on the counter, all charging quietly. Erin took her usual seat at the far end of the table, closest to the door to the apparatus bay. She set a spiral-bound notebook down in front of her and opened it to a page filled with tight handwriting. Medication dosages, trauma algorithms, handwritten updates to protocols. She read the lines again, even though she could have recited them in her sleep. The others drifted in and out of the room in a loose rhythm. Jenny slid into a chair 2 seats away, scrolling on her phone. A paramedic from another unit flipped channels with the remote. Captain Daniels walked through with a stack of forms and a coffee mug that had "World's Okayest Boss" printed on the side. "Morales," Daniels called. "That chart, I need it before I die or retire, whichever comes first." "I'm working on my art cap," Luis replied from a computer terminal. "You cannot rush greatness." Daniels snorted. "From what I have seen, we can rush your spelling." They traded looks and half-smiles, the kind that came from being awake more nights than anyone was meant to be. In the corner, Erin turned a page in her notebook. She had been at Station 14 for 2 years. She arrived early, left late, never missed a shift. She did not go to after-work drinks. She did not show up in anyone's social media. Her name tag said, E. Hayes, nothing more. She answered questions when asked, but never offered stories. It was as if she had been dropped into their world, fully formed, with no past and no context. In the quiet just behind the noise of the room, voices threaded together. "She is good, though," someone said. "Technically, I mean." "Sure," another replied. "I just have not seen her on a really bad one, like a true mass casualty. She barely talks. I do not know if she freezes under pressure or what." Erin lifted her pen, listening without letting her expression change. The words were not whispered loudly enough to be confrontational, but not soft enough to be truly private. She had heard some version of the same conversation in every station she had worked. She pressed the tip of the pen to the notebook and began copying a protocol, line by line, ink flowing in small, even strokes. The act of writing settled something inside her, the way rolling a bandage did, the way locking a compartment did. Outside rain ticked against the windows. It blurred the glow of the gas station across the street, turned passing cars into streaks of white light. The first call of the evening had been routine, a fainting spell at a grocery store. Erin had knelt on sticky tile between rows of cereal boxes and used her calm, practiced voice to guide a panicked teenager through her breathing. No lights, no siren on the way back, the kind of call that filled most nights. It was the second call that people remembered, the one from 3 weeks earlier on the I-5 overpass. Multi-vehicle collision, rain-long skid marks and twisted metal. Luis still talked about it at other stations. "You should have seen her," he had told another crew later, not realizing Erin was within earshot. "Scene was a mess. Glass everywhere, one car rolled, another hanging half off the rail. Everybody yelling. She walks in like she is stepping onto a training floor, picks the worst trauma calls it, and goes to work. No shaking, no freaking out, nothing. Cold," the other medic had said. Luis had hesitated. "I do not know if I would call it that. Just locked in, like she has been somewhere worse." Back on the overpass, Erin had moved with an economy of motion that came from repetition. Hands finding landmarks without looking, clamp seal lift check. She had climbed into the back of a crumpled sedan to reach a trapped driver, her boot slipping slightly on broken glass. Her gloves had been slick with blood by the time the firefighters finished spreading foam. The patient had lived. No one had asked Erin afterward how she felt. No one had asked where she learned to work in a storm of sirens and shouting human voices without flinching. They had slapped her on the shoulder, said "nice job" and gone back to the station. In the day room now, her shoulder-length hair was pulled back in a simple tie. She wore no jewelry, no visible tattoos, nothing that might reveal a hobby, a side life, a past. Her phone lying face down beside the notebook did not light up with messages. Jenny looked over. "Hey, Erin," she said. "You ever think about doing something else, like flight medic or trauma center nurse or something? You have the brain for it." Erin took a moment before replying. "I like the truck," she said. "What, you like the sirens?" "I like arriving first," she said. "Sometimes that is all the time you get." Jenny frowned slightly, trying to decide if that answer was a joke or not. Before she could ask, the station tones sounded, a rising 3-note alert that cut through the room. Every head turned toward the speaker on the wall. Voices and laughter clipped off in mid-sentence. Pens were set down, chairs scraped back. Erin's notebook closed with a soft thud. "Medic 384, the dispatcher said. "Respond priority 1 reported unconscious female, possible seizure, Pioneer Apartments Unit 307. Luis grabbed his jacket as he moved. "Up you go, Hayes," he said. "Showtime." Erin slipped her notebook into her bag and rose. Her hands did not shake. She had done this more times than she could count. She followed him out to the bay, the cool air meeting her face as the garage door started its slow rise, rain outlines visible beyond. She stepped into the rig, the familiar smell of disinfectant and vinyl wrapping around her like a worn blanket. Behind her, the tones faded. The siren would come later if they needed it. Her hand rested for a second on the secured trauma bag. Full. Zipped. Ready. "Medic 3 en route," Luis said into the radio, and Erin settled into her seat, feeling the gentle forward lurch as the rig pulled out into the wet Seattle night. The rain tapped a steady rhythm on the roof, and Erin listened to it, counting the beats in her head until the pattern steadied her breathing. The city lights slid across the windshield in smeared colors as they headed toward the next address. The elevator at Pioneer Apartments smelled faintly of bleach and old cooking oil. Its fluorescent light flickered just enough to be annoying. Erin watched the glowing numbers count up, felt the slight sway as the car climbed. Luis leaned back against the metal wall. "Third floor seizure at dinner time, Bougim," he said. "Place is probably packed. You ready for your fan club, Hayes?" Erin checked the small kit in her hands. "Vitals, airway history," she said. "We will be fine." The doors slid open into a narrow hallway lined with identical brown doors and scuffed trim. A woman in leggings and a college sweatshirt waved at them from halfway down. "Over here," she said, voice tight. The patient was a teenage girl on the living room carpet, breathing fast but steady, skin pale and damp. An older woman knelt beside her, hands hovering, unsure what to touch. The television in the corner was still on, sound muted, a game show host smiling silently. Erin dropped to her knees, introduced herself, and went to work. Her questions were simple and clear. Any history of seizures, any recent illness, any drugs, any head trauma. Her hands moved calmly, adjusting the girl's head, checking her pupils, counting respirations. She spoke to the girl in a steady tone, even though the girl's eyes were closed, as if the words could anchor her. Luis wrapped a blood pressure cuff around a thin arm and called out numbers. Erin nodded once and gave the mother a small look that was not quite a smile, but close. "She's breathing on her own," Erin said. "We are going to take her in to be checked, all right. You can ride with us." By the time they wheeled the girl to the elevator, the panic had softened to worry. The mother clutched her daughter's backpack, fingers white around the straps. In the rig, Erin secured the girl's head, rechecked her airway, watched her chest rise and fall. The siren stayed off. The wet streets slid by without urgency. Later, when the paperwork was done and the girl admitted to a pediatric bed, the call blurred into dozens of others in the station log. It was the next week that stayed sharp. It started with rain again. The gray ceiling over I-5 hung low, spilling water in sheets. Headlights glowed in the midday gloom. The wet pavement shone like a mirror. Medic 3 was returning from a transport moving steady in the middle lane. Louise hummed along to an old song on the radio, tapping the steering wheel. Erin sat in the passenger seat, her gaze tracking the flow of traffic ahead. The call came in as a burst of static and urgency. Multiple vehicle collision northbound I-5 near exit 162. Reports of at least 3 vehicles, 1 overturned, possible entrapment. Louise's hand went to the light bar switch. Medic 3 copy, he said. We are 2 minutes out. The siren rose a long wail that cut through the thick air. Cars ahead began to slide aside, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Erin braced one hand on the dash as the rig threaded through. The scene appeared around a curve. Hazard lights flashed in orange clusters. A sedan sat sideways across 2 lanes, its hood crumpled. A pickup leaned against the concrete barrier, front end smashed. A white SUV lay on its side near the guardrail wheels, still spinning slowly. Jesus, Louise muttered. Erin was already unbuckling. They parked at an angle for protection lights, painting the rain in red and blue. The air smelled of burnt rubber coolant and the sharp metal tang that meant more than just machines were hurt. People stood in small clumps, some on phones, some shouting, some frozen. The sound of crying and an idling engine blended into a rough noise. Take a quick scan, Louise said. Find our worst one. Erin moved through the chaos, eyes taking in details. The man leaning against the sedan, holding his arm, face twisted but alert. The woman in the pickup sitting upright, dazed, but talking to a bystander. The SUV on its side windshield, spiderwebbed roof, kissing the rail. She went to the SUV. Seattle Fire, she said out of habit, though her patch said medic. Can you hear me in there? A muffled voice came faintly from inside. Help, I cannot move. The driver's side door was pinned against the rail. The passenger side was up in the air. Erin climbed onto the lower frame, peered through the broken glass. A man in his 30s was strapped into the driver's seat, hanging sideways in his belt arms, braced against the steering wheel. I am Erin, she said, tone steady. Stay with me. Are you having trouble breathing? My chest, he said, feels crushed. His breaths were quick and shallow. His skin looked pale even in the gray light, a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead. Erin's mind started marking boxes. Mechanism of injury restraint use positions, signs of internal trauma. Rain ran down the side of her face, carrying tiny shards of glass against her glove. She called back to Louise. Driver in the SUV, probable chest trauma priority 1, she said. Get me a collar in the trauma bag. Call for an engine company if they have not already. Fire resources were on the way, the dispatcher had said, but minutes on the radio were drawn out long on the side of the road. Erin reached inside and placed 2 fingers gently at the side of the man's neck. His pulse thudded too fast, a hard flutter against her glove. Can you take a deeper breath for me? She asked. He tried and winced, a strangled sound escaping. Okay, Sip, she said softly. Do not force it. Short breaths are fine for now. Louise appeared at her side, passing up the collar and bag. You want to wait for fire to stabilize this thing before we crawl in there? He asked. Erin's eyes traced the angle of the SUV, judged the risk of movement, the distance to the ground. The roof was holding for now. The man's breathing was not. They can crib it when they get here, she said. He will not be breathing better if we wait. She slid herself further inside, careful with her weight, and brought the collar up under the man's jaw. Her movements were smooth, no wasted motions, as if she were working in an exam lab instead of on a highway with rain blowing in her face. Once his neck was secure, she opened the trauma bag by a feel, fingers going directly to what she needed. She pressed along his chest, gentle but firm, watching his face, feeling for abnormal movement and tenderness. He hissed when she reached the left side. That hurts. I know, she said quietly. I need to find out where. She listened closely with her stethoscope, the sound of his lungs faint under the noise of passing cars and drizzle on metal. Air moved on one side better than the other. She noted it, eyes narrowing slightly. Behind her, sirens approached, growing louder, then slowing as fire engines arrived. Voices barked orders, boots thudded. A firefighter in turnout gear appeared at the edge of her vision. Medic, we will get this thing stabilized, he said. You need to back out a sec. In a minute, Erin said without looking up. I need one strap on his chest tight, then I will move. The firefighter hesitated, surprised by the clipped authority in her voice. Then he nodded and stepped back to confer with his crew. Luis crouched lower, rain soaking his hair. You always climb into upside-down cars in the rain, he asked. Or is this your new hobby? Erin looped the strap under the man's arm, securing him to the seat to prevent a sudden drop when they cut the belt. Her hands were sure economical. When they cut him free, I want control of the fall, she said. Help me guide his weight. Once the vehicle was cribbed and the glass cleared, the firefighters cut the seatbelt. Erin and Luis took the man's weight together, lowering him in a slow pivot until he lay on the inner door, then the backboard. The motion was fluid, rehearsed, even though none of them had practiced this exact setup. The man groaned but kept breathing. Later at the hospital, while the trauma team swept him away in a flurry of gowns and orders, one of the younger nurses watched Erin's hands as she gave report. There was a kind of rhythm in the way Erin spoke facts, arriving in a clean sequence. Mechanism restrained driver SUV on side, Erin said. Complaints of chest pain and shortness of breath, decreased breath sounds on the left. Suspected rib fractures, possible pneumothorax. The nurse blinked impressed. That is some assessment, she said after the gurney disappeared through swinging doors. You ever worked trauma center? Erin shook her head once. No. Luis, standing beside her, pulled at the cuff of his damp sleeve. She has worked somewhere, he said under his breath. Back in the rig, when the doors closed and the noise of the hospital muted, Luis stared at her for a long moment. The way you climbed into that SUV, he said. The way you called it before anyone else had a chance to think. That is not just experience from city calls. Erin kept her eyes on the clipboard in her lap. It was what the patient needed, she said. That rib check you did the pattern. That is not textbook EMT. Where did you pick that up, Erin? She could feel his gaze trying to catch hers. The wipers squeaked across the windshield, clearing arcs in the drizzle. She adjusted the strap on her seatbelt, then reached for the radio. Medic 3 returning to service, she said. Luis waited for a beat, then let it go with an exhale that sounded more like a low whistle. One day you will answer a personal question, he said. I might not live to see it. The rest of the shift rolled on. They cleared another call, a domestic complaint that turned out to be nothing more than a shouting match that had already burned out. They restocked what they had used and handed in their reports. The highway crash settled into the stack of calls in the system, reduced to numbers and coded phrases. By the time Erin walked up the narrow stairs to her apartment that night, the rain had turned from sheets to a fine mist. The building smelled of old carpet and someone's cooking something with too much garlic. Her unit on the second floor was small. A sagging couch, a thrift store table, a narrow bed. The blackout curtains were drawn tight across the windows, leaving the space in a dim gray that did not change much between day and night. Erin hung her jacket on the same hook, lined up her boots, beside the door, so the toes matched. In the kitchenette, she filled a glass with water from the tap and took a small white pill from a bottle in the cabinet. She swallowed it without looking at the label. On the wall above the table, there were no framed photos, no diplomas, no posters. The only personal item was a small silver frame that sat face down near the salt shaker. She hesitated, then picked it up. The photo was slightly faded. 6 people stood in front of a squat concrete building under a harsh sun. They wore desert uniforms, sleeves, rolled sunglasses pushed up on their heads. Sand clung to their boots. Someone had caught them mid-laugh. At the center, younger hair tucked under a cap, was Erin. On the bottom edge, in black marker, somebody had written, Raven Team Aldarim. Her thumb moved slowly across the glass, tracing faces she knew by heart. She counted them in order, lips pressing together when she reached the last. The room felt smaller, with the photo open, the air heavier. The hum of the refrigerator faded behind another sound that arose in her memory, the crack of something heavy breaking the distant rumble of collapse, a voice over a radio calling, Raven 1 report, Raven 1, where are you? Erin closed her eyes until the room came back into focus, then flipped the frame down so the picture faced the table again. She pulled the curtains a little tighter, as if the city outside might be trying to look in, then sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the thin hiss of rain against the window pane. The day's calls slid through her mind, the girl on the apartment floor, the man hanging sideways in his seatbelt. Her hands, remembered in motion, seemed steadier there than in her lap. She lay back, staring at the dark ceiling. The pill would blunt the edges of the memories, slow them, keep them from sharpening into something she could not step away from. Outside, somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn sounded from the direction of the waterfront, low and long, vibrating faintly through the glass. The shift calendar turned over twice. The rain did not seem to notice. Morning blended into afternoon under the same low blanket of gray. Calls came and went. A fall in an assisted living facility, a chest pain that turned out to be heartburn. A cyclist clipped by a car door who insisted on joking through his own bandaging. People bled, cried, argued, thanked them, or said nothing at all. Erin charted, cleaned, restocked. At home, the silver frame stayed face down on the table. She did not pick it up again. On a Thursday evening, the air felt colder than usual when Erin stepped out to the bay. Her breath showed in faint puffs as she checked the rig. The rain was a thin drizzle now clinging to the open edge of the garage door. Luis came up beside her, tearing open a packet of instant oatmeal. "Captain is trying to kill us," he said. He brought in another pot of decaf. "That is not lethal," Aaron said. "It is cruel." He shook the oatmeal into a chipped mug and poured hot water from the dispenser. The smell of artificial maple seeped into the bay. Aaron opened a cabinet and counted oxygen cylinders by touch and habit. "Full, 3/4 half," she murmured. "What was that?" Luis asked. "Nothing." They had just settled into seats in the day room when the tones dropped again. The room tightened around the sound. "Medic 382, the dispatcher said. "Respond priority 1, reported male down at Pier 49, possible industrial accident. Additional information incoming, stand by." Luis set his coffee down, eyes flicking to the wall clock. "Pier's at this hour," he said. "Somebody did something dumb with a forklift." The radio crackled again before anyone stood. "Update for Medic 3, the dispatcher said. Patient reported as active duty military, unconscious severe bleeding, scene secure, responding units use caution." Erin's fingers closed around the radio mic before she realized she had moved. Her hand felt too tight on the plastic. "Medic 3 copy," she said, responding. Luis looked at her just for a fraction of a second. There was nothing obvious to see. Her face was the same calm shape as always. Still, he asked anyway. "You good?" he said quietly. "Yes," Erin said. She let the mic fall back into its clip and headed for the bay. The ride to the waterfront cut through blocks of old brick warehouses and newer glass fronts. Streetlights reflected in slick pavement. The rig's tires spat water into the dark. Through the windshield, the cranes at the port rose against the clouds, tall and skeletal. The faint sound of a ship's horn drifted across the basin, low and drawn out. It was the same note she had heard through her apartment window, only louder. Luis wove the rig through light traffic. His jaw was set in a slightly tighter line than usual. Military scenes always change the dynamic. More authority, more scrutiny, more people giving orders. "Pier 49, he said. That is the one with the warehouse on one side and the ferry dock down the way right." "Yes," Erin said. She knew it by sound, now more than sight. The horn, the gulls, the way wind came off the water, sharper than inland. As they turned off Alaskan Way, the pier came into view lit by sodium lamps that threw everything into deep yellow. 2 dark vans with government plates sat near the entrance. Red and blue lights strobed from a couple of city patrol cars. Shadows moved in quick, purposeful lines. Luis swung the rig into position near the edge of the cluster, leaving space for fire units that had been dispatched behind them. The smell of diesel and salt water hit as soon as the doors opened. Erin stepped down boots, splashing in shallow puddles on the rough concrete. The air was colder here, the wind cutting through her jacket. It carried the sharp chemical tang of spilled fuel, the faint sour of old fish from somewhere farther down the pier. A man in a reflective vest and fatigue pants jogged toward them. "Over here," he called. "We have 1 critical, multiple minor. The others are walking." His haircut and bearing marked him as military police even before Erin saw the patch on his shoulder. "What happened?" Luis asked as they moved. "Training load went sideways," the MP said. "Pallet shifted while they were moving gear off a truck. He got pinned. Corpsmen did what they could until you got here." They rounded the nose of a parked truck and the scene opened up. Containers loomed on one side, stacked like dark teeth. A low warehouse wall ran along the other. Under the harsh glare of portable lights, a small cluster of uniformed figures crouched around a motionless body on the wet concrete. The soldier's combat uniform was soaked not just from rain, but from a smear of dark that ran from his midsection down one leg. Sand clung to his knees and boots, fine and pale, clashing with the gray of the pier. It looked wrong here, out of place, like another landscape had bled into this one. Erin's footsteps slowed for half a beat when she saw it. She knew that kind of sand. She knew how it got into seams and laces, how it stuck to sweat and blood and never wanted to leave. The corpsman, a young woman with a face tight enough to crack, looked up as Erin approached. "Pressure bandage on tourniquet high on the thigh," the corpsman said briskly. "We think internal bleeding may be pelvic. He lost consciousness about 30 seconds ago." "Name?" Erin asked. "Sergeant Cole Bennett," the corpsman said, 27. Erin nodded and knelt beside him. The concrete was cold through her pants. Cole's skin was pale lips tinged with blue. Rain dotted his eyelashes. The bandage at his side was already starting to seep through. "Sergeant Bennett," Erin said, leaning close to his ear. "My name is Erin. You are with medics. We have you. Can you hear me?" No response. His eyes stayed closed. She pressed 2 fingers into the soft hollow at his neck. The pulse under her glove was rapid and thin, like something backing away. Luis crouched at Cole's feet, looking up the length of his body. "What do you need?" he asked. "Get the board and straps," Erin said. "We need to package and move now. I want a line in him on the way oxygen on monitor if we can manage it. The corpsman shifted aside to make room. Her hands shook slightly as she held the bandage. I should have gotten a second line before he went out, she said, anger aimed at herself. You kept pressure where he needed it, Aaron said without looking up. That matters. She slid her hand to the femoral artery pressing through damp fabric at the crease of his groin. The beat there was weaker than at his neck, lighter farther away. She adjusted her pressure eyes, focused attention narrowing to the feel under her fingertips. The other sounds around her blurred. Luis glanced at her, then back at the soldier. You find it? He asked. Yes, she said. It had taken her a single smooth motion to go to that spot. Not a search, not a guess. I practiced pathway. 2 other soldiers slid the backboard into position on Aaron's count. The straps were slick in their hands. On 3, she said. 1, 2, 3. They rolled him as gently as they could, the corpsman never losing contact with the wound. Cole's head lolled, slightly rainwater dripping from his hair. As they settled him, his right hand jerked. The movement was small at first, a reflex against the cold, then turned into a weak, grasping motion. His fingers brushed against Aaron's wrist and closed their skin warm over the scar hidden under her sleeve. His eyes opened. They did not open fully. They fluttered, then fixed on her face through a veil of water and pain. For a heartbeat, there was only confusion, the raw look of someone surfacing through medication and shock. Then something like recognition cut through. His grip tightened fractionally. Aldarim, he rasped, voice rough as gravel. You were there. Aaron's stomach folded in on itself. The name fell into her like a stone. You need to save your strength, she said, keeping her tone steady, her hand steady inside his. The world tunneled for a breath. The rain around them became distant. The glare of the light seemed too bright. He swallowed a thread of red at the corner of his mouth. Raven, he whispered. Raven 1. I know that face. Luis froze halfway through tightening a strap. What did he say? He asked, looking from Cole to Aaron. Raven what? Aaron did not answer him. Her eyes stayed on the soldier. Sergeant Bennett, she said. We are taking you to a hospital now. You are going to feel movement. Stay with me. His hand twitched in hers, as if he wanted to say more, but the grip loosened. His eyelids sagged. The pulse under her fingers fluttered dangerously. We need to move, she said louder now. Together they lifted the board and carried it across the slick concrete toward the waiting rig. Boots splashed through puddles. The pier lights cast their shadows long. Inside the ambulance bay, the hoops of the overhead doors framed the dark water beyond. The faint lights of ships blinked on the horizon. They slid the board into place and locked it onto the stretcher. The interior lights snapped on, turning the small space into a bright white box. Luis reached for the monitor cables and nasal cannula. You are with me and back, he said to Aaron. She was already snapping a blood pressure cuff around Cole's arm. Close the doors, she said. The corpsman stood just outside rain dripping from her cap, eyes wide and fearful. Will he make it? The corpsman asked. Aaron met her gaze for the first time. We are not done working yet, Aaron said. The door shut with a solid thud, cutting off the sound of the pier and the water. The siren came alive above them as Luis pulled the rig away from the dock, heading toward Fort Brightwater. Inside the moving box, with the lights bright and the floor vibrating under her boots, Aaron placed her fingers once more on Cole's neck and felt the thin, failing rhythm there, the echo of a desert city written into his blood. The siren drilled through the night, its rise and fall vibrating through the walls of the ambulance. Outside, Seattle blurred by in streaks of wet color. Inside, everything shrank to the rectangle of Cole Bennett's body on the stretcher and the readings on the monitor. Aaron wrapped the blood pressure cuff snug around his arm and hit the start button. The machine hummed. She watched his chest instead of the screen. The rise was shallow, barely more than a tremor. Each breath seemed to snag halfway. The cuff deflated with a hiss. Pressure is 60/30, Luis called from the driver compartment, watching his repeater. We are 10 minutes out from Brightwater if nobody gets in our lane. 10 minutes was a long time for a body that could not keep its own blood where it belonged. Aaron clipped the pulse oximeter to Cole's finger. The number blinked, then settled. Too low. His skin had that gray tint she knew too well, the color that meant the body was starting to give up parts of itself to keep the core going. The bandage at his side was darker, the edges wet again. She raised his shirt enough to look careful not to expose more than she needed. The tourniquet on his thigh was high and tight, the skin beyond pale and waxy. The wound at his flank was hidden by layers, but the spread of blood told the story. Sergeant Bennett, she said, leaning closer. Can you hear me? His eyes opened a crack. The pupils were slow to find her. Raven, he whispered. She pretended not to hear the word. She focused on the way his lips moved, the way his throat worked around it, weak, strained. Stay with me, she said. You are almost there. His gaze slid to a point over her shoulder, then drifted. The monitor beeped in an uneven pattern. Luis's voice came back through the small opening between cab and back. How bad, he asked us, Bad, Erin said. She glanced at the clock, then at the small drawer that held needles and catheters. Her hand went there without a pause. We are losing him, she said. He has decreased breath sounds on the left. I think he has a tension pneumothorax. Luis cursed under his breath. You going to wait for them to crack his chest? He asked. No, Erin said. She popped the drawer open and pulled out a large bore needle, her motions crisp. She stripped the packaging with her teeth, spit the plastic aside, and moved to Cole's left side. The protocol says, we cannot do that in the field, Luis said. You know that. Erin cleaned the skin with a quick swipe of antiseptic, feeling for the correct landmarks with practiced fingertips. The space between ribs was familiar under her glove, a map. Her hands had learned long ago in another heat under another kind of sky. He's not going to make it to protocol, she said quietly. She met Cole's eyes, or where his eyes would be if he could fully open them. You are going to feel pressure right now, she said. This is going to help you breathe. He managed a small nod. Or maybe his head moved with the motion of the rig. Either way, she took it as consent. She advanced the needle in a careful, firm push. The resistance of tissue gave, then there was a sudden release, a faint hiss of trapped air and a thin spray of blood. The sound was small in the noisy box, but she heard it like a valve opening in a flooded room. Cole drew in a longer breath than he had managed since the pier. It was not perfect, but it reached deeper, his chest expanding more fully. The monitor's beeping pattern shifted, smoothing slightly. Luis glanced back briefly, eyes wide. You have done that before, he said. Erin withdrew the needle and secured the catheter, taping it down with quick strips. The blood on her gloves made her fingers slick. I have done what is needed before, she said. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling the rise and fall. The left side still lagged, but it moved now. Air entered. That was something. For a moment, a different scene rode on top of this one. The rough canvas of a foreign stretcher under her knees, the smell of dust and burned rubber voices shouting coordinates over a radio that crackled with static. Her own hands had been stained, then too red, turning brown in heat instead of washing pink in rain. Erin blinked and the ambulance came back into focus. The metal walls, the overhead lights, the familiar rattles of equipment in their brackets. Cole, not the corporal from Building 3. Seattle, not Aldarim. Pressure, she said, nodding at the cuff as it cycled again. 70/40, Luis reported, climbing slowly. Good, she said. She hung a bag of fluid, spiked it, and opened the line wider. His veins would not thank her for rushing volume into a bleeding system, but they needed something to push. She adjusted the oxygen, watched his face for signs of increasing distress, looked for the subtle pull at the base of his throat, the strain of muscles trying to wring air from a reluctant chest. The siren shifted pitch as Luis took an off-ramp. The sway of the rig changed tighter turns, now city streets instead of highway. 2 minutes out, he called. Erin leaned in close once more. Sergeant Bennett, she said, we are almost at Fort Brightwater. You do not have to talk, just listen. Stay with the sound of my voice. His lids fluttered. His hand twitched, searching again. She let her wrist rest where he could find it. His fingers brushed the edge of her glove, then settled, too weak for a real grip. The gates of the military medical center came and went outside in a blur of concrete and white security lights. The rig slowed, turned, then backed into the receiving bay with a practiced bump. The rear doors swung open to a blast of colder air and bright overhead fixtures. Figures in scrubs and uniforms crowded the opening, a small army of ordered motion. Sergeant Bennett, 27, industrial crush, probable internal bleeding, possible pelvic fracture tension, pneumo on the left needle decompressed en route, Erin called as they rolled. Words spilled out of her in measured cadence. Mechanism vitals interventions. She passed the information to the trauma team as if handing over a carefully packed bag. 2 orderlies snapped on additional monitors. A nurse adjusted the oxygen mask. A doctor with 3 bars on his chest called out orders in a clipped tone. As they moved through the automatic doors into the main trauma hall, a young lieutenant standing off to the side looked up from a clipboard. His gaze brushed across Erin's lid, then jerked back. He stared. His face went pale under the fluorescent lights. His mouth parted slightly. You have got to be kidding me, he whispered. He took a step forward, then another as if pulled. Ma-am, he said, voice rough. Ma-am, is that you? Erin's hand was still on the side rail of the stretcher. She felt the sudden shift in attention before she saw it. Heads turned. The rhythm of footsteps stuttered. We are rolling to Trauma 2, someone said, adjusting course. The lieutenant moved alongside, eyes locked on her face. Staff Sergeant Hayes, he said, Raven 1. The name hung in the air. A nurse glanced between them. Raven what? She asked, confused. The lieutenant spoke louder now, as if volume could make the impossible real. Raven 1, he said. From Aldarim, she's supposed to be dead. Erin's fingers tightened on the rail. For a moment she considered letting go, turning, walking out, disappearing into the rain outside. Her body did not move. She kept pace with the stretcher as it slid through the corridor. The words rippled along the hall like a dropped stone in water. Raven One. That is her. You sure? I saw her photo on the memorial wall. They reached the open doors of Trauma 2. The team swept in surrounding the gurney. Erin gave the last of her report to the attending physician, a man with tired eyes and a steady voice. Needle decompression was successful, she said. Breath sounds improved on the left, but still diminished. Pressure climbing from 60/30 to 70/40 with fluid. Tourniquet applied in the field by Corpsman time marked on the strap. The physician nodded. You did good work, he said. We have it from here. She stepped back. The door swung partially closed, muting the flurry of motion inside. Behind her, boots struck the tile in a heavier cadence. An older man in a well-pressed uniform pushed through the cluster of staff. Silver hair-lined face, a chest full of ribbons. His presence drew automatic straightening spines and shifting stances. Where is he asked. The injured sergeant? In there, sir, the lieutenant said, snapping to attention. His gaze flicked back to Erin. And sir, there is something else. The older officer, a colonel by his insignia, followed the lieutenant's glance. His eyes landed on Erin. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. The murmur of the hallway seemed to recede. His brow furrowed. Lines deepened at the corners of his eyes. Recognition uncoiled slowly, then all at once. Dear God, he said softly. He stepped forward until they stood a few feet apart. Erin felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. Her hands hung at her sides now, fingers stained with someone else's blood. Staff Sergeant Aaron Hayes, he said, his voice steadying. Raven One of Raven Team Al-Dareem, officially killed in action 8 years ago. There were gasps, small and sharp, around them. Erin swallowed. Her throat felt dry despite the humidity of the hospital air. Sir, she said quietly. With respect, I'm just a civilian paramedic now. I brought a patient. The colonel straightened, his shoulders squared. Then, in the middle of the crowded corridor, he lifted his hand to his brow and gave her a full, formal salute. The hallway stilled. Nurses stopped mid-step. Orderlies froze with charts in their hands. For a second, even the monitors behind closed doors seemed quieter. The colonel held the salute a heartbeat longer, then dropped his hand. You may be many things now, he said, but you are not just anything. Color rose in Erin's face, not a flush of pride, more the heat of a spotlight she had not asked for and did not want. I drive a truck, sir, she said. I work calls in the city, that is all. He studied her expression, the set of her jaw, the way her shoulders sloped slightly forward as if she had spent years trying to make herself smaller. We carved your name into stone, he said. 6 coffins draped in flags. I handed your mother a folded triangle and told her you died, pulling your people out of a collapsing sector. Are you telling me I lied to her? The image hit her without warning. Her mother's hands clutching at a flag that did not belong to her, the picture of her daughter in a frame beside official condolences. Erin had not been there to see it, but she had imagined it enough times for it to feel real. You did not know, she said. Command called it. The building fell. They stopped listening for answers. I did not correct them. The colonel's eyes hardened, not with anger, but with the effort of reconciling 2 realities. Why? I asked. The question held more weight than one word deserved. Erin looked past him through the narrow gap in the trauma room doors. She saw a flash of blue gloves, the corner of a sterile drape, the movement of a ventilator bag. Everyone else in that photo died that day, she said. Their names were on the tag with mine. I walked out when they did not. That was enough of a funeral for me. Her voice did not wobble, but there was a tightness behind it, a pressure not unlike the one she had just relieved in Cole's chest. A younger man in a white coat edged closer, drawn by the gravity humming in the air. His badge read Noah Clark, M.D. He looked between the colonel and Erin, eyes wide. Sir, he said, addressing the colonel, is this really Raven One, the Raven One? The colonel did not look away from Erin. It is, he said. Noah exhaled slowly as if he had been holding his breath. I read about you, he said, words tumbling a little. The way you navigated Sector 7 after the bombing, the 19 evacuees. The field surgeries, the improvised triage points. They taught some of your cases at the academy. Erin shifted her weight. Stories grow, she said. The ground truth is uglier. Noah shook his head slightly. Ugly or not, it saved lives, he said. Do you understand what it would mean if people knew you were alive? You could change how we train medics, how we support them after they come back. You could be a symbol. The word made something in her recoil. Symbols live on walls, she said, on screens, in speeches. Her eyes moved to the narrow window set in the far wall of the hall. Beyond it, she could see a slice of the parking lot, the shape of an ambulance, red paint dulled by rain. I live in the back of that truck, she said. On corners and stairwells and bad carpets. That is where I am useful. Noah frowned, trying to understand the refusal. You could do both, he said. Erin shook her head once. You have never stood in front of a room where everyone is looking at you for meaning, she said. Where they turn you into a story they need more than they need the truth. I ran from that doctor. I ran from the noise. She met his eyes, then steady without anger. I did not run from the fight. The colonel's face changed at that, some of the strain easing. He nodded slowly as if something had settled in him. You have been serving all along, he said. Just changed your battlefield. Erin did not answer. Her hands felt strangely empty without gauze or tape in them. Behind the trauma doors, a voice shouted for more suction. Someone called out a blood pressure. The world of immediate crisis went on indifferent to the quiet, seismic shifts in the hallway. Hayes, Louise's voice cut through from behind her, hesitant. They need us to clear the bay. We still have to decon and get back in service. She turned, slightly grateful for the practical anchor. We are done here, sir, she said to the colonel. He inclined his head. For now, he said, this is not over. His tone held promise, not threat, but Erin heard the weight in it all the same. She stepped away from the knot of uniforms and white coats, the circle that had closed around her without permission. As she walked back toward the double doors leading to the ambulance bay, she felt eyes on her from both sides, some curious, some reverent, some simply stunned. A young soldier on crutches who had been leaning against the wall straightened as she passed. His left leg was encased in a brace, scars peeking above the edge. He said, his voice breaking a little. You patched my leg at the west gate in Aldarim, under mortar fire. You told me if I could still swear at you, I was fine. Erin paused. I remember a lot of swearing, she said. He gave a breathy laugh that threatened to turn into a sob. They told us you died, he said. We had your name on the list. Seeing you here, it is like a ghost walked in. She looked at him, really looked, taking in the lines of his face, the set of his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the crutch handles. You are still standing, she said. That is what matters. Walk out of here. Live something decent. That is your job now. He nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, ma'am, he said. She let her gaze rest on him for one more second, then turned and pushed through the doors into the cooler air of the bay. Rain tapped on the concrete outside, a lighter fall than earlier, almost a mist. The ambulance sat where they had left it, streaked with water and road grime back doors still open. Erin climbed in. The interior smelled of blood, antiseptic, and the ghost of adrenaline. She pulled on a pair of clean gloves and began to wipe down the stretcher rails, her motions steady, deliberate. Louise joined her, grabbing a spray bottle and a rag. You okay? He asked after a while. The question was simple but carried more layers now than it would have an hour earlier. Erin looked at the metal surface she was cleaning, watched the pink tinge of diluted blood run toward the drain channel. We are still in service, she said. Ask me between calls. Louise huffed a quiet sound that might have been a laugh. Yes, ma'am, he said. He said it lightly, but there was a new inflection there, a new awareness behind the familiar title. Outside, somewhere beyond the bay, the city went on breathing. The hospital lights glowed against the wet night. The water in the harbor shifted with the tide. In the ambulance, Erin's hands kept moving, making the space ready again, putting its pieces back in order. By the time Erin stepped through the side door of Station 14 the next morning, the rain had settled into a thin curtain that blurred the parking lot into a smear of gray and brake lights. Her boots left faint, damp prints on the concrete as she came in. The station felt different. The same fluorescent lights hummed. The same coffee smell hung stale in the air. The same stack of forms sagged on the counter. Yet something had shifted in the space between people, in the way voices dropped off when she appeared in the doorway. Jenny sat at the table in the day room, her hair still damp, a tablet propped in front of her. She was frowning at the screen. Louise leaned over her shoulder, one hand wrapped around a steaming mug. I am telling you, he said, half of that internal bulletin stuff is rumor. This one has a colonel's name on it, Jenny answered. They do not put colonels on rumors. She swiped with her finger, scrolling. It says, quote, civilian paramedic in Seattle provided advanced field intervention to save Sergeant Cole Bennett, previously evacuated from Aldarim, by decorated combat medic Raven 1, she read aloud. Identity of paramedic confirmed as former Staff Sergeant Erin Hayes. Louise hissed through his teeth. They used your full name, he said. Jenny looked up and saw Erin in the doorway. Her eyes widened. The tablet tilted forward. I was not looking for you, she blurted, then winced at her own words. I mean, I was, but not like that. It just popped up on the department portal. Erin walked in far enough to set her bag down on the chair she always used. She hung her jacket on the backrest and smoothed the fabric once. It is fine, she said. They were going to talk to each other. Louise lifted his mug as if in salute. Morning, Sergeant Hayes, he said, then corrected himself. Erin, habit of rank is hard to break. Do not start saluting me, Erin said. I'm pretty sure Captain is going to, he answered. As if summoned, Captain Daniels appeared in the doorway from the office area, a clipboard tucked under one arm. For once, there was no crease of irritation between his brows, no sarcastic remark loaded on his tongue. He looked at Erin for a long second, weighing something, then crossed the room and stopped in front of her. "Hayes," he said, "can I talk to you?" The table fell quiet. Jenny pretended to look back at her tablet, but her eyes did not move across the text. Someone in the kitchen stopped rattling sugar packets. Erin straightened slightly. "Yes, Captain," she said. He drew a breath, let it out slowly. "I owe you an apology," I said, "a real one." Her brows lifted a fraction. "You do not have to," she began, but he shook his head. "I do," he said. "I have been doing this job a long time. I pride myself on reading people. I saw you come in, head down, few words, no stories, and I made a lazy call. I decided you were timid, that you had not seen enough fire yet." He glanced at the tablet in front of Jenny, at the lines of text, at the small photo clipped to the internal article that showed a younger version of Erin in desert brown. His jaw flexed. "Turns out," he said, "you have been in more fire than any of us." The room held its breath. Erin stared at the captain's chest for a second, at the faded ink stain near the pocket where his pen always leaked, then lifted her gaze to his face. "You judged what you saw," she said quietly. "Everyone does that." "I judge volume, not depth," Daniel said. "How loud you were, not how solid. That is on me. You come in, do the work, never ask for anything, and I let the crew write you off as the quiet one, as if that meant anything about your backbone." He shifted his weight. "I am sorry, Erin," he said truly. There was no flourish in his words, no attempt at humor to soften them, just a square man in a worn uniform trying to match his posture to what he now knew. Erin let the silence sit for a moment before she answered. She could feel the eyes at the edges of the room, people pretending to be focused on something else and failing. "We all carry what we carry," she said. "You did not know what mine was. I did not tell you. I liked it that way." Her mouth curved not quite into a smile, but close enough that the tension in her face loosened. "We are here to run calls," she said. "If you want to make it right, give me the hard ones and let me do my job." Daniels huffed a small breath that might have been a laugh. "Deal," he said, "although from what I hear, every call you take turns into a lesson." He took a step back, then paused. "And for the record," he added, "no one here is calling you timid again." He turned away before anyone could see the shine at the corners of his eyes. The room exhaled. Jenny looked up again, her expression softer than the curiosity she had worn before. "So, all those things I thought I was teaching you," she said. "I was just making noise, huh?" Erin shook her head. "You were keeping the air moving," she said. "That matters on long nights." Luis pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, setting his mug between them. "All right," he said. "Ground rules. No shrine, no weird nicknames, no one printing out your picture and taping it to the lockers." Jenny glanced guiltily at the printer in the corner. "I was not going to," she said quickly. "Uh-huh," Luis said. "I was going to make it my phone wallpaper," she muttered. Erin almost laughed. The sound came out small and unfamiliar, but real. "Please do not," she said. Word traveled faster than formal bulletins. By mid-shift, the firefighters on the next run with them were different. The jokes were still there, but softer around the edges. Banter gave way more easily when Erin spoke. Officers on scene nodded at her as if she outranked them by default. On a chest pain call at a downtown office, a police sergeant holding back curious co-workers glanced at her name tag, then did a double take. "You are Hayes," he said then. "Is Fallujah?" "Yeah," he said from that memo. Erin finished placing the leads on the patient's chest before she looked up. "I am Erin," she said, "from Medic 3. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, seeming to decide that was enough. At a corner grocery restocking gauze and saline, the clerk who had hardly ever looked up from his phone offered her a discount without quite meeting her eyes. "You are out there in all that rain," he said, shrugging as if to make it less significant. "On the house for first responders." Luis teased her all the way back to the rig. "Look at you," he said, "changing the economy one free gauze at a time." In the next few days, small adjustments stacked up. People stopped talking over her in quick scene briefs. When she made a suggestion, no one argued out of habit. When a rookie from another unit hesitated on how to handle a tricky airway, their field training officer turned to Erin almost automatically. "You want to walk him through it?" he asked. She did, her voice calm, as always, her hands demonstrating the angle, the feel, the landmarks. The rookie followed her instructions as if they were the only path forward. The ribbing about her quiet habits faded. Where there had been dismissive comments, there was now a careful respect. Not noisy, not worshipful, just a steadier kind of regard. It felt strange on her skin, like a new uniform she had not ordered. Late in the afternoon of the third day, after the pier call, when the lull between runs had stretched longer than usual, Erin sat alone at the table reviewing a protocol printout. The station had grown quieter, the buzz of early-day conversations worn down by hours of work. The side door opened, letting in a brief gust of cooler air. Captain Daniels stepped in, a thick envelope in his hand. "Mail drop," he said, holding it up. "This one is for you." He offered it across the table. Erin wiped her fingers on her pant leg before taking it. The paper was heavy, the kind used for formal invitations. The return address in the corner bore the seal of the Department of Defense embossed in dark ink. Her full name was written in precise block letters in the center. "Looks official," Louise said from the sink where he was rinsing out an old travel mug. Daniels watched her with a look that mixed curiosity with something more protective. "They routed it through city administration," "It is just what he said. "The chief called me into his office, wanted to make sure I knew what you did out there at the pier. He also said to tell you that whatever this is, you are under no obligation to say yes." Erin turned the envelope over in her hands. The flap was sealed clean, no tampering. She could feel the faint ridges of the embossed symbol through the paper. "Thank you," she said. She did not open it at the table. She slipped it into her bag, tucking it between the pages of her notebook, the way she had tucked other things away. Other reminders of worlds she did not quite belong to anymore. Outside the large front window, the rain began to fall a little harder again, tapping a steadier rhythm against the glass, as the scanners on the counter crackled with new calls. Erin opened the envelope at her kitchen table that night. The blackout curtains were drawn tight, muting the city into a damp hush. The overhead light cast a small circle on the cheap wood. Her jacket hung on the same hook by the door, her boots lined up neatly beneath it. She slid a finger under the flap, careful not to tear the paper more than necessary. The scent of ink and cardstock lifted as she pulled out the folded letter. Her name sat at the top in bold type. Below, thick paragraphs flowed in formal language. "The Department of Defense cordially invites recognition of extraordinary valor, ceremonial presentation of medals, Washington, D.C. at a date to be determined." She read it once, then again slower. Every line tried to fit her back into a shape she had stepped out of a long time ago. Staff Sergeant, Raven 1, Campaign Heroics. Each title felt like a uniform 2 sizes too small. At the bottom in ink, instead of printed text, was a handwritten note. "Hayes, you may not want this, but you have earned it. Let us do right by you this time. Harper." She pictured the colonel's face in the hospital hallway, the way his salute had cut through the noise. He was trying to tidy something in his own history as much as in hers. On the table beside the letter lay the silver frame. It was still face down. She flipped it up just enough to see the edges of uniforms and sun and sand. The laughter trapped there did not match any ceremony hall she had ever seen. Erin reached for her notebook and opened to a blank page. The paper felt thinner under the weight of what she needed to say. She uncapped her pen and began to write. "Sir, thank you for the invitation and for the recognition you have already shown. I remember what a folded flag means. I do not take it lightly that one was handed to my family. I also know where my hands are most useful now. They are not in front of cameras or on a stage. They are in the back of a medic unit on the floor of somebody's living room in a stairwell on a sidewalk. That is the work I can still do. I would rather spend that day on call here than in a room full of speeches about who I used to be. Respectfully, Erin Hayes." She paused on the last line, then added one more sentence, small and plain. "Raven 1 is retired." She copied the letter into an email on her old laptop, attaching a photo of her signature just to make it feel more real. The cursor blinked at the end of the message. Her finger hovered over the trackpad for a second, then clicked send. That was all. No fanfare, no echo. She shut the laptop and placed the paper copy of the invitation back in its envelope. Instead of hiding it, she set it in a drawer by the sink next to rubber bands and spare batteries. Something that had happened, nothing more. At the station the next evening, the fluorescent hum sounded the same, but there was an extra smell in the air when she walked into the day room. Tomato sauce, melted cheese, garlic. Pizza boxes sat stacked in the center of the table, edges curled from heat. Jenny looked up, caught mid-reach for another slice. "You are early," she said, then corrected herself. "Earlier than everyone else." Louise stood by the counter, arranging paper plates. Captain Daniels leaned against the doorway, hands in his pockets. The television was off for once. "What is this?" Erin asked. "You asked." "Official department debrief," Louise said. "On the subject of how badly we misjudged the quiet one." "Meaning you," Jenny added around a mouthful of crust. Daniels straightened, pushing off the frame. "We wanted to say something that did not come in memo format." "Sure," he said, "if that is all right." Erin glanced at the boxes, at the mismatched chairs, at the faces around the table. Nobody wore dress uniforms. No one held a camera. "Pizza is usually all right," she said. They laughed, the sound loose, not forced. When everyone had a plate, Daniels cleared his throat. He did not hold up a glass. He just rested one hand on the back of the nearest chair as if steadying himself. I am not good at speeches, he said, so I will keep this short. He looked at Aaron. You walk in and out of this place every day like you are part of the furniture, he said. You let us think that. You let us put our assumptions on you. Meanwhile, you were carrying things none of us could see, and you were quietly doing some of the best work any of us will ever be close to. He glanced around the room. The quietest person at this table has more miles on her than all of us put together, he said. That does not mean we put you on some pedestal. It means we remember not to judge anybody by how loud they walk in the door. He stopped as if aware he was drifting into the kind of talk he usually rolled his eyes at. He pulled it back. Anyway, he finished, we are glad you are here, Hayes. There was a murmur of agreement, low but sincere. Aaron felt every set of eyes for a heartbeat, then felt them ease off as if the room collectively decided not to pin her to that moment. She picked at the edge of her plate. No one here owes me anything, she said. We all do the same job. I just started in a different place. Luis shook his head. You started somewhere hotter, he said. You are allowed that much. She let a small smile show. We all carry invisible things, she said. You do not see them unless someone drops them. Most of the time, the best thing we can do is remember that and not push too hard. They ate. Conversation drifted to normal topics, calls from the past week. A broken stretcher wheel that had nearly dumped a captain on a driveway. The strange things people said when they woke up from sedation. No one brought up Washington. No one asked if she was going. Either they did not know about the letter or they trusted the envelope in her bag to stay closed on its own. Later, when the boxes were reduced to grease spots and crumbs, the tone sounded again. The sudden alert cut neatly through the room. Medic 3, respond for difficulty breathing residential South Holgate Street. Luis pushed back his chair. That is us, Fifu. That's, he said, showtime. Aaron grabbed her jacket from the back of the chair, slid into it, and followed him to the bay. The rain had picked up heavier, now the air cool and clean. The rig waited under the open garage door lights, dark paint glistening in the damp. They climbed in. As the engine turned over and the radio answered the dispatcher, Aaron watched the water streak down the windshield. The sound of it on the roof steadied her familiar as a heartbeat. The call light flipped from off to on. Luis eased them out into the night tires, hissing on wet pavement. At the edge of the lot, a flagpole rose against the dark sky. The American flag snapped and settled in the wind, its colors dulled by the clouds but still clear. Aaron's gaze touched it for a brief moment. There was a wall somewhere miles away with her name carved into stone. There was a flag folded in a box in her mother's house. There was a letter in a drawer that she had already answered. Here there was a city breathing in the rain and a truck carrying her toward the next address. She rested her hand on the trauma bag, feeling the weight of its contents through the fabric. Medic 3 en route, she said into the radio. The siren stayed silent as they drove, tires whispering on the slick road, the steady tap of rain above them, the hum of work that never stopped. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.